네, 그러면 이제 컨퍼런스의 마지막 세션을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 제가 이제 올해 이제 일본 교토에 열린 빅서밋에 참가를 했었는데요. 뭐 사실 제가 뭐 일본 행사에 대해서 이렇게 막 빠삭하게 아는 건 아니지만은 그래도 이제 가까운 나라인데 상당히 많은 이제 외국 분들이 직접 이제 거기서 이제 일본에서 마치 이제 네이티브처럼 이렇게 게임을 개발하시는 거 보면 상당히 문화적인 충격을 많이 받았고요. 그래서 이제 저희도 이제 어떻게 보면 이제 이런 행사가 정말 이런 이제 분위기가 한국에 있었으면 참 좋겠다라는 생각을 많이 하게 돼서 이렇게 BIC까지 이렇게 오게 된 게 아닌가 생각이 되는데 거기서 이제 제가 이제 눈여겨본 작품이 이제 지금 세븐틴비트의 이제 전시할 작품인데요. 이제 제이크 카즈달 씨가 이제 26년 차 이제 경험 베테랑이시고 특이하게 아까 마크가 글로벌 컨티넨트 팀이라는 이야기를 했잖아요. 그런 것처럼 이제 제이크 카즈달 씨도 시애틀과 교토에서 정말 이제 대륙간 어떤 그런 이제 인디 팀을 운영하면서 게임을 개발하고 계신데 상당히 이제 퀄리티가 좋고 이제 오랜 경험을 쌓으신 그분에 대한 이야기를 한번 들어보고자 하겠습니다. 자, 제이크 카즈달 씨에게 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다.
안녕하세요. This is my first time to Korea, so thank you all for welcoming me. Thank you guys for offering me this incredible position, and it's been a fantastic show. You guys are doing a really, really great job. This is a really cool scene, and I'm glad to meet so many cool new people already. So I'm Jake Kazdal. I've been working in the games industry since 1989, so it's been a long time. I'm old. It's been a long, interesting journey, so I'm just going to start skipping into this. So I run a small studio called 17-Bit. We have a studio in Seattle, Washington, where I'm from, and we have another studio in Kyoto, Japan, where I moved about a year ago. We've got the teams about half and half on each side. I grew up sort of in the early days of video games. I'm sort of the first generation of like pure video gamers. It's been around since the mid 70s. I started playing, late 70s, I suppose. I started playing arcade games a lot, and grew up through the the NES and the Super NES, the Famicom, Super Famicom Japan era. So our games are really based on sort of the classic gameplay of the past, married with modern technology and all the updates and upgrades we can do through modern tech. I grew up playing arcade games just all the time. My father had pizza restaurants when I was a child, and he always had sort of a game center in the back. So even as a small child, my parents would both be working, they'd be busy, and my father would give me a couple of quarters and just say, go get lost back there for a couple hours. So I grew up playing all the first generation of the hardcore, arcade games like Asteroids and Centipede, Mario Brothers, and Donkey Kong, and kind of all that generation of stuff. And I've loved video games since I was, very little. And I think the kinds of games I like to make are very based on this early love of games. These big machines and on the buttons and the controls, and it was so tight. And back then the graphics couldn't be very amazing, so the game had to grab you, sheerly through the interest of the game. It had to feel fantastic, and it had to control fantastic, and that's kind of the generation of stuff that I really fell in love with. Luckily, I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and Nintendo's headquarters in America was just down the street from my house. So as soon as I turned 16, I found out you could get a job there. And so I went and got a job there, and it was the first generation of what we call the game counselor. So this is before the internet, when people would get stuck in a game, and they could call the Nintendo hotline and talk to brats like me who spent my whole day playing games, and when people would get stuck on a certain boss or at a certain level, we would be the counselors that would walk them through the experience. So it was a free number back then. I think they went on to charge for it later, but I spent 2.5 years there during high school, and started making industry connections that I'm still in touch with to this day. There's a lot of people that still work there. Actually, Nintendo has an amazing track record of keeping people there for 10, 20, 30 years even. This is my friend Brian here, actually, who was one of my leads when I was there. He went on to form his own studio after he left Nintendo, which was my first job in production. And then he now is back at Nintendo many years later in development, making the new Mario and Donkey Kong games. Back then, this is again pre-internet, so we didn't have the internet. So we had maps. The game counselors would get together and people would be assigned different games, and you would have to go through and make maps and hot tips, and sort of be able to explain to everybody. And everybody had binders at their desk of all these maps and stuff, and you would try to find you know, if someone's like, I'm stuck in the ice dungeon on the 5th level of Faxanadu or whatever, and you would have to kind of go in and find the map and try to find, you know, where they were stuck or where they missed a sword or, you know, where they missed a pickup, something like that. And we sort of started moving into the first computer database called Elmo, where people would type in this stuff, and you could type in keywords and the answers would come up. So it was a really interesting time to be a part of all this. I went to college for a year not knowing what I wanted to do with my life, which is funny because all I did was sit around, draw, and play video games. I had no idea what I wanted to do as a professional. So I went to college for a while, didn't like that very much, and I went to Japan. I moved to Japan to take a semester abroad, and it was during the kind of the heyday of the Super Famicom stuff, the 16-bit Nintendo stuff, and so I really fell in love with. I realized that all I wanted to do was play games in my life. That's all I wanted to do was make games and draw and stuff. So I went back to art school, and then I was at Enix for a while. So Enix is now Square Enix, you know, the Final Fantasy, stuff like that. Back then they were known for their Dragon Quest, which was called Dragon Warrior in the United States. So I was the only game counselor there. At Nintendo there was, you know, I don't know, maybe 100 of us. At Enix it was just me in a little room, just playing the Dragon Quest and stuff all day. And then I would talk to people and, you know, talk them through how to, you know, get past these areas that are stuck in their games. Talked to a lot of senior citizens that were retired and had nothing better to do than play Dragon Quest all day with, like, without a sword. They would try to go through the whole game just by using their fists, stuff like that. Very interesting. Illusion of Gaia was, you know, I also did sort of bug testing and certification submission, stuff like that for Nintendo. So we did Illusion of Gaia, and that was actually the first game that I have my credits in. I went back to art school, finished animation school in Vancouver, Canada, went to the Vancouver Film School, and then came back to Seattle and joined a studio called Boss Games, which was run by Richard Edlund, who was kind of a Star Wars special effects guru. He had Boss Film down in the Bay Area, and they started up a game studio. So I was at Boss Game Studios doing level design and character design and you know, art, textures, stuff like that. It was my first real production job. And we worked on a cool game called Spider that we thought was the first 2.5D game. It was a PlayStation game, and we were convinced that we were the first ones to do a 2D gameplay in a 3D world. And about 6 months before we launched, another game came out called, I think it was called Pandemic. And they had done everything we had done, but better. And so we were really bummed about that. Went on to do a snowboarding game called King Hill 64 in Japan, and in America it was called Twisted Edge. Doing level design and art and all that stuff, and I really fell in love with it. And one day I was lucky enough to meet this guy, Tetsuya Mizuguchi. I met a guy who knew him, who had worked with him. I had just read a big article about Mizuguchi-san in Edge magazine, and I knew all about him, and he was going to be at E3 in Atlanta. So I went to Atlanta that year for E3, and I got to meet Mizuguchi-san, and we just hit it off. We had a great time, and he told me all about this new team he was forming. He had been the head of one of the big arcade game divisions at Sega in Tokyo. So they did, like, he was responsible for Sega Rally and a bunch of other kind of really cool racing games, Manx TT. Sega Rally had been one of my favorite games in college. I spent a lot of time drinking beer at the pub near our animation school and just playing this game over and over and over again. So it was a real thrill to meet him. And I found that he was starting a new studio. This was right before the Dreamcast launched in Japan. He was starting a new studio that was focused on trying to break away from sort of Sega's you know, bread and butter games, like the really hardcore arcade stuff and some of the kind of hardcore consumer stuff. And they were trying to go for a broader audience. They were trying to do some different things. And so this division was built right in Shibuya, Tokyo, which is kind of the heart of the youth culture in Japan there. The headquarters was down in the industrial district in Haneda. It was a very not interesting neighborhood. So we were really lucky that we were right in the heart of the city, kind of, you know, surrounded by the modern youth culture of Shibuya in Tokyo there. And these games were meant to sort of go after all new audiences and do different sort of things. So it was a very kind of eclectic team. There was, I mean, I was the only foreigner there, so it was, you know, they had an American on the team. There was a mime who was our animator. You know, we worked with DJs and club musicians and VJs, and there was a very eclectic mix. It was very untraditional game design mix. So that was a really interesting time. The first game I worked on it's called Space Channel 5. Very different than the hardcore. I mean, this is the era of Virtua Fighter and Daytona USA. Like, you know, Sega was known for their kind of hardcore arcade stuff. This game was like, the team was more than half women, which was really unusual too. So it was very heavily, the woman was art director, lead designers. I mean, it was a lot of women in charge of the game. And so we tried to do something much more appealing to a broader audience. You know, it was not targeted after the hardcore male gamer user. It was more like, you know, they wanted to get a new audience for the Dreamcast. It would sort of change gears for Sega. It was a success. It wasn't a big financial success, but it was a good critical success. And you know, I still meet a lot of people these days that played a lot of this game and love it a lot. So it's good to know that years later this game is still sort of known for what we achieved. I moved to Tokyo in 1999, and I was part of about a 40-person team, and no one spoke English except for Mizuguchi-san and our producer. So I didn't stop to think about that until I got there, and I realized, wow, I can't communicate with anybody. This is amazing. So, luckily I was an artist and I could sort of talk with my hands. I drew pictures and drew characters and stuff like that, and I was an animator. But within about a year's time, it's funny when you get thrown into the deep end like that, you pick up the language pretty quickly. So I was able to speak, pretty, not fluently, but pretty good. I could get by with my team definitely within about a year's time. And this was just a fantastic project I was super proud to be a part of. After that was this game, Rez. This is the game that I really moved to Japan for. When I met Mizuguchi-san in Atlanta in 1998, summer there, he sort of described this concept that he wanted to do, this game, and I had wanted to do something similar to sort of music and very all-involving. It's actually very Thumper-esque in a way. This was a huge title for all of us. It was a very weird team, non-traditional sort of corporate structure. It's a small creative team. We were given a lot of time to do a lot of really weird experiments and not be pressured by headquarters to go after like certain target sales or stuff like that. It was very sort of a different sort of title. It was just awesome. And I met some of the coolest people. Some of these guys are still some of my closest friends. I realized how talented, these guys were crazy talented. And I had gone to animation school and I started working in games right away, and so I could make characters and I could do the animations and stuff, but I wasn't a designer. And so watching these guys have their process of how they would design, how they would come to conclusions and really work through a process to come to an answer, to come to the right answer, I was so motivated by these guys. I just was unbelievable how talented they were and how great they were to bring me in and kind of teach me all this stuff. But at that point, I realized if I really wanted to stay serious about my career, that I needed to step it up a notch further. So I was kind of sad to leave, but I decided to leave Sega. And in 2003, it was right before Mizuguchi-san and the whole kind of team fell apart, and they went off and formed a new company anyway. But I left and went to Arts Center. I went back to Los Angeles in California, Pasadena, and attended I looked for the best design school I could find. I really wanted to become more of a designer. Like I said, from the Rez guys, they were so just they're process oriented, and to watch them go from not having any answers to having really solid answers in this really just concrete, awesome process. So I went here and I studied industrial design for about 3 years. So I studied car design and product design and illustration. The car design guys kind of laughed at me because I never wanted to be a car designer, but I wanted to make spaceships. I wanted to draw spaceships and stuff for games and movies and stuff like that. So I learned a lot of good stuff, but it was all the fun kind of goofy high-end stuff. I didn't have to pay too much attention to the nuts and bolts of how wide the wheel well was and stuff like that. So it was a really fun time. I was about to graduate, and a friend of mine sort of tricked me, and he pulled me into EA in Los Angeles to kind of come check out what they were doing, and it turned out to be about a full day of interviews to join this experimental team. So I think I was literally one semester short of graduating from Arts Center, and EA offered me a job working directly with Steven Spielberg on this project called LMNO. It was a code name, LMNO. So it was, again, a very creative, amazing team. We had a bunch of people coming in from Hollywood. We had a Hollywood art director, Hollywood writers, Hollywood concept artists. And this title was sort of Spielberg's big, foray into games. Like, he had kind of worked on the Medal of Honor stuff. He'd been sort of one of the front runners on that. So he'd worked with that studio before. And this was going to be his big sci-fi, big budget, very progressive, very ambitious, totally new game, and we were going to blow down all these walls, and it was going to be amazing. And the team was fantastic. We had a bunch of looking glass guys, and people with really long, great careers. It was really intelligent people, but the game was so ambitious and so overly ambitious, I guess, where we were trying to solve 1,000 new things. And it proved to be too much. So the game, after about 2 years in development, even though we were sure this was going to be the next big thing, it fell apart and it didn't end up shipping, which was a bummer. So after that started to slow down, I moved on to Steven Spielberg's other game called Boom Blocks. It was a Wii game. I designed the user interface for that for a while. And then I moved on to the Command & Conquer team, which is a very popular turn-based strategy game, or real-time strategy game in the States there, and I'm sure worldwide. we kind of were working, this was right when the free-to-play stuff was kind of getting really going. This was like 2007, 2008. So we were doing a free-to-play version of Command & Conquer, which had not been done before. We got really far into it, we had a really fun title, and they sort of pulled the plug. They decided they didn't want to go free-to-play. We morphed it into Command & Conquer 4, which sold terribly because it was kind of shoved together, and then they went on to reboot the free-to-play stuff, which again, never took off. So working at EA, I learned a lot of what not to do when making games. I mean, they're a big corporate place. They've got a ton of cash. I actually met Pete over there. He was an intern with me on that team. God, how many years ago was that? 7 years ago. So it's interesting. He lives in Korea now. It's interesting to see him here. This is a lot of fun. But I got to work on a lot of sci-fi stuff there. I got to make my tanks, I got to make my spaceships, and my airplanes, and my aliens, and all this kind of stuff that I'd studied. So I had a really great time. I worked with a really fun team, and I learned a lot about doing this kind of heavy-duty industrial design stuff. I moved back to Seattle to join a smaller studio called Zombie, where I was going to be art director on a title called Black Light Tango Down, which again was very dark sci-fi. I'd been doing dark sci-fi concept art for about 5 years at this point, and everything was very gritty and dark and sci-fi, and I wanted to do something different. So I started noodling around the idea of doing something on my own on the side. I had my first child at the time, and so I started coming home after work and spending a lot of time with my wife, and she was just taking care of the baby. So I had some free time, so I started doing something. I wanted to do something cute. I wanted to get back to my animation roots and draw something cute and fun and simple and not dark and not gritty and not sci-fi. And so I created this game called Skulls of the Shogun. I worked with my friends Barut and Ben, were two programmers I had worked with at EA on the Element project, and we all decided to leave our corporate jobs and go independent, and so I started the studio, and they both kind of came on as contractors, and we built this game. It was about 3.5 years in development. This was a very long title. We ramped up to about 7 people by the end. Won a bunch of awards, had a really great time. We ended up signing with Microsoft, and we were the first game to do cross-platform kind of network stuff. So the game, you could play it on Windows 8. The Windows 8 was just coming out, so you could play it on Windows 8 versus people on the Surface tablets, versus the Windows Phone users, versus the Xbox users. They could all kind of play together. We thought it would be a great win for us, so we committed to this, even though it was really 2 engineers, and it was really hard work. Like, it was just that we were really out of our league, and it was a lot of pulling out our hair. So we don't have any hair anymore. We went crazy with this stuff. But it did end up working, and we ended up winning a bunch of awards and had a great time. And then, the game has come out since on every platform known to man. Besides Nintendo, I think is on every platform right now. So please check that out. For the last 3 years, I guess just over 3 years, we've been working on this title, Galaxy, which was, this is a love letter to the games that I grew up playing. So I grew up, playing Defender and Asteroids and all these old spaceship shooters, and I grew up watching the old Japanese anime, like Star Blazers, Yamato and Macross, stuff like that. And I don't watch a whole lot of anime these days, but I really still watch a lot of the old stuff. I really love the old cheesy stuff that I grew up watching as a kid, and so this game was really just all about that. I really like, physics-based gameplay that allows for a really long skill curve, or long ramp-up of getting better and better and better at the game. It's sort of a simulation more than a simple shooting game. It sort of looks like a simple shooting game, but it's all physics-driven, so you've got thrust, you're in a zero-G, you're in outer space, and you thrust, you just go infinitely in another direction. And what I've always wanted from classic games is for them to look great and to control great, but I wanted the challenge to be great in a sense that it's not just sort of pre-engineered enemies throwing at you, just shooting and shooting and shooting. Like, I wanted to take the best of modern gameplay, like, take stuff like Far Cry and Halo and modern, high-end combat simulation and shove that into this classic shell. So I think we've achieved that. Let me see if I can get this trailer to work here. So these enemies actually have eyes and ears. They see you, they communicate with their squads. If their shields are down, they'll run up and try to get them recharged. They'll try to get back up. It really is a kind of a combat simulation game more than just a simple shooting game. It just looks like an old school shooting game. It's a shop, you can upgrade all your weapons. Lots of different types of weapons. And of course you can transform into a robot, because it's awesome. So that was a lot of fun. That project was fantastic. During development of this game, I knew I wanted to move back to Japan really bad. I'd missed Japan since I'd left it. And even though the team was kind of rooted in Seattle, I told everyone, like, let's move to Japan, it's gonna be great, let's move to Japan. So everyone wanted to come with me. And then the game kind of took longer than expected, kind of like Mark with Thumper. You think it's gonna be next year, and the game just kind of was not done. So eventually, my son is 6 years old now. He was going to start school, and my wife had found a really good program for him in Kyoto, Japan, where we wanted to live. So we ended up going over there early on our own, and we hired a couple people that were Kyoto and Osaka-based locals. So we've got a couple guys now. The team's about half in Kyoto, like I said, and half in Seattle, which is good because we are able to do the shows, kind of like Mark said. We've got to do the shows in the States, we get to do the shows in Asia. I was part of the Tokyo Indie Fest. We go to Bit Summit and TGS and all these things, while also doing the GDCs and the E3s and all that stuff in the United States. We've got a bunch of great partners in the United States. We work with Fangamer who do the shirts. Sony put us up in their booth at E3, and they actually built us a costume of the pilot for the game. That's our animator there, being a goofball. It's been a lot of fun, but it's been a lot of challenge managing the team, across the ocean. The time zones are very different. It's different communicating with the team. All the engineers are on that side, and most of the design is on this side now. So it's been a real struggle, but we are, one by one, they're starting to move over, and we're kind of, moving up and solidifying the Kyoto team as sort of the headquarters of the company. Kyoto is a fantastic city. The reason I live there, and the reason there's any indie scene really at all there, is because of these two gentlemen here. This is Dylan Cuthbert and Giles Goddard, who both of them were brought over by Nintendo in the early 90s to help develop the first 3D games on the Super Nintendo system. So both those guys moved to Kyoto in the early 90s and sort of set up shop there and fell in love with it. Both of them were at Nintendo for a long time. Dylan ended up going up to Sony in Japan and Sony in America for a while, but they both kind of since then settled and built their own indie studios in Kyoto. Very successful studios and very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very international. They've got big teams of a lot of Japanese staff and a lot of foreign staff from all over the world. There's British, French, they're from all over the place. And so they've sort of established this really cool indie home there. There must be probably at least 30 or 40 foreign developers between the two companies. And there's a lot of other stuff between Osaka and kind of that whole area. Nintendo's there as well. There's a bunch of stuff going on. So there's a really good, thriving indie scene, and we're sort of building it every year bigger and bigger as we plan to expand and continue to grow. It's been a real treat getting to know these guys and being welcomed so much into the scene here. They've been able to help me with accountants. These are our accountants that we use, that both the other studios both use. This is our lawyer, immigration lawyer, who helped me get my visa and helping us bring some of our other guys over. And then with the Nintendo stuff, I'm such a Nintendo fan, and I grew up playing the Nintendo games and having these old, Nintendo developers and stuff all in the area, getting to meet these guys, and hopefully someday get to work with them has been just an incredible thing. So the indie scene there is great. There's the three major kind of indie studios are all in Kyoto there. We all spend a lot of time together. We party together. We go snowboarding together. The snow in northern Japan is fantastic. We go out drinking, at least a couple times a month. Vitae, Giles' studio, which we've got some members up here, Ma in the back there. They throw the Vitae Mega Night, which is once a month. It's all the sort of developers in the area come to Vitae's back studio, and we have a bunch of beer and food, and we put up projectors and play games all night and have a great time. We spend a lot of time just having lunches with each other. We go out a lot on weekends. We go hiking. Kyoto's a phenomenal city for just a lifestyle city. There's nature surrounding everywhere. There's a lot of tech and a lot of cool, interesting industry there, but there's also like the old history. It's an ancient city that was never bombed by the Americans during World War II, so it's old. It's got a lot of old restaurants. It's just a lot of culture, and it's a great place, and everyone who lives there just absolutely loves it. It's a beautiful city. I'm a photographer and a concept artist, painter, so it's super, super inspiring for me to be able to go out on weekends and go to these ancient temples and go for walks in the woods and just kind of go taking walks down these old city streets you know, they're before cars were made, so they're very thin little streets, and there's just a million things to see and do. You know, there's a lot of old school game creators here. A lot of the Nintendo guys kind of grew up in this area, so being able to be a part of this and sort of seeing the same sort of things they saw and being inspired by the same sort of things that these classic game designers that are a generation older than me is hugely inspiring for me. It's just, like I said, it's an amazing city. I ride my bike to work. I don't have a car anymore. Most of my friends don't have cars. It's a very balanced, beautiful place to live, and you know, I feel like I've been dating cities my whole life. I've lived in a bunch of different countries. I've been all over the place, but I feel like Kyoto is where I really want to settle down. I really love it there. I have a Twitter account where I post these pictures that I take every day on my bike ride to work, and I get a lot of grief from my friends all over the world they're jealous, and they make fun of me for taking so many great pictures, but I mean, this is what I get to see every day on my way to work, so you can't really blame me. This is pictures of the Indie Mega Night. I mean, it's kind of hard to see how many people are in here, but we get pretty good crowds in there, and we meet, you know, a lot of people from Osaka, people come down from Tokyo, and all these developers get together and just have a great time. I mean, it's a really positive indie scene there. They're very supportive of each other's studios. We spend a lot of time, I mean, all the studios, we hang out, you know, together. We spend a lot of time, you know, playing each other's games, and just, it's a really great, strong community there. And we spend a lot of time going out and getting ramen. There's Yama-chan there having some ramen late at night. The restaurant scene is insane there. I mean, the Michelin-rated restaurants, I think there's more Michelin-rated restaurants in Kyoto than all of France. It doesn't make any sense at all, and it's affordable, it's incredible. Since then, you know, we've been kind of working on building up this Kyoto as this sort of Japanese indie hub. You know, Tokyo is very much the AAA hub with all the big studios are up there, and there's a couple in Osaka, but Kyoto we're trying to build up as the hub of the indie scene, and a big part of that has been the Bit Summit stuff. So, is John Davis back here? Is he here?
He's just went downstairs.
Unbelievable. All right, that guy. The Q Games originally started this Bit Summit thing, which is kind of similar to the Busan Indie Festival here, where we, you know, would build a community. We would showcase local independent games. The Japanese independent scene has kind of been slower to start than the West, but it's getting going now, and we've been, you know, very happy to be a part of this and support this. I'm part of JIGA, which is the Japanese Independent Games Association, which we formed this last year to help build Bit Summit and make it bigger and invite more foreign developers and get everybody kind of focused around this really burgeoning, blossoming independent scene in Japan and around the world. And so it's been a fantastic opportunity for us to make a lot of new friends and really sort of build the scene there. This year was our third year, and every year it's gotten bigger and bigger and better and better. And this year was by far our best show. You know, a lot of developers, a lot of press, a lot of great, just, you know, meeting people and kind of watching the scene grow. It's just been absolutely fantastic. I'm super thrilled to be there. One of the best things about being in Japan for me is, you know, I spent 5 years in Tokyo during my Sega years, and so Kyoto is a much quieter, smaller city than Tokyo, but there's a lot of, I mean, it's very easy to get to Tokyo. It's about 2 hours. So I can leave work at 6 p.m. and I can be in Tokyo by 8 p.m. having dinner. We work with some great partners up there. The top left up here is 84. They're a localization company that is run by some very close friends of mine. They help us with our writing and stuff like that. They do translations for a lot of the big Nintendo games, a lot of the big Konami games. And so being able to network with them and take advantage of their networks and be up there all the time while still living in Kyoto has been fantastic. Next to them is Terada-san. Terada Katsuya is a famous Japanese artist. He's one of our contractors we've been working with. He's a worldwide incredible talent. I think he's arguably one of the best illustrators that ever lived. I mean, watching him work is phenomenal. So getting to know him and getting to work with him, I see him about once a month when I go up there, which is fantastic. We have good connections with Sony America, who published our PlayStation 4 version of our game. But I've been able to spend time with Sony Japan too, so getting their support and being able to get up there every month or so and getting to know those guys has been, you know, obviously a huge benefit for us. So we get to take advantage of our connections with Sony America in the United States side and then Sony Japan side. And recently we announced our partnership with Gung-Ho, as a big mobile publisher in Japan who does you know, a lot of mobile game stuff. And so we are doing a mobile version of Galaxy with Gung-Ho. And so I go up there every month and do meetings with their design team, and we're sort of, you know, taking this console game, breaking it all the way down and bringing it back up as a mobile game, which has been a really interesting process, and they're a fantastic partner. So the advantages of, you know, of me being in Japan and being able to kind of roll all over between Kyoto and Tokyo and Osaka have been massive. That's it. That's kind of what we do. You can follow us. 17bit.com is our webpage. I'm Jay Kuza on Twitter. We also have a company Twitter account, 17_bit. Making games is tough, but we keep fighting and we're having a great time. And I just want to thank you all very much for having us here today. Thank you.
네, 그러면은 질문 있으시면 받도록 하겠습니다. 네.
Japan is the country which have one of the biggest game market, but some guys call Japanese game market as Galapagos of the game world, as negative meaning because of its specialty. What's your opinion about it?
Sorry, could you repeat that last part? I didn't understand part of it.
맞아. But some guys call Japanese game market as Galapagos of the game world.
Galapagos. Yes, I agree. Especially with the Japanese mobile stuff is moving deeper and deeper into Japan-specific market. It's becoming harder and harder for them to, I think, market that stuff worldwide, and they don't spend a lot of time playing foreign games. The Japanese games love Japanese games. That's what they spend time on. As an international studio, we focus on the Japanese market. We're working on entering the Japanese market, but we also are largely an American team that focuses on the European and American markets. I don't depend on being able to get into the Japanese market. I don't think that it'll be necessarily, that wouldn't be a good plan for us. You know, we are very foreign and we've got very different sort of ideas than Japanese mainstream gaming. But as we grow, we would like to be able to, you know, using our position in Japan and working with these partners to be able to do more stuff that is focused on being applicable for the Japanese market as well as the international market. But the Japanese market is a tough nut to crack. It's a very distinct, special place, and it's changing a lot these last couple of years.
네, 여기 동시 통역이 준비되어 있으니까요. 예, 한국어로 편하게 질문하셔도 좋습니다. 혹시 다른 질문해 주실 분 안 계십니까? 그러면 제가 한번 마지막으로 한번 질문을 드리겠습니다. 이제 슬라이드에서 이제 교토에 대한 이야기를 되게 많이 주셨는데요. 이제 그 예전부터 했던 이랬던 동료랑 만나고 꽤 이제 괜찮은 이제 중견 기업들이 같이 뭉쳐서 인디 게임 커뮤니티를 이제 이루면서 이제 즐겁게 게임하는 것이 되게 인상적이었는데, 보통 이제 인디 하면은 이제 개인 작품, 이제 보통 이제 개별적으로 보통 많이들 행동하지 않습니까? 근데 이제 이런 커뮤니티를 만들고 행사를 하고 하는 행동들이 어떤 개인적인 창작 활동에 얼마나 큰 영향을 주는지 좀 개인적인 의견을 좀 듣고 싶습니다.
I think, you know, we don't get far as a truly independent in this world, especially in the games world. I mean, I think that's one of the things we've learned. You know, we can take away from Kelly's talk. You know, we've been part of the Bit Summit, or the Indie Mega Booth since the very first year of that. And by going every year and meeting all these other independent developers and sharing our networks and sharing our information, everybody grows and everybody benefits. And so I hesitate to call us, you know, super indie, like off doing our own thing. Like we work closely with lots of other indie studios, and I talk a lot with the other CEOs of these other small studios that are friends of mine, and I ask them questions and they ask me questions, and we share all the knowledge and all the stuff we've learned as much as possible, because we're not really in direct competition. I mean, there's hundreds of games released every day. It's not like me not helping them is going to hurt my sales. So, you know, on the opposite, I think by helping each other, we can get much further, much faster, and you know, it's one of the best things I think about this industry, particularly the indie game scene, is that people are so open and they are open to helping each other. You know, I know film is very competitive, and I have a lot of friends that work in film, and it's very sort of backstabby and a very brutal, difficult environment. And I'm very glad that the indie game scene is kind of moving really hard in the opposite direction to really support each other. And you know, we are all independent, and that we're all kind of, you know, lost at sea in our own little boats. But the more we can band together and sort of support each other, the stronger we're all going to be.
마지막 한 가지만 더 질문 드릴 텐데요. 한국과 중국 시장에 대한 생각 한번 듣고 싶습니다. I would like to get opinion about the Korean and China game industry.
I would like to sell my games there. It's a very big market. I think the Asian countries have their own tastes and a very different sort of market. The Chinese market in particular is very famous for being very hard to penetrate by Western developers. But by being a part of Asia and coming to places like this and meeting Korean developers and Korean media, and hopefully I'll be able to do some in the same in China, we would like to market our games there. I think that a lot of this market grew up watching the same kind of anime that I did, and they love the spaceships and the giant robots and stuff. There's no reason we shouldn't sell these games here. It is a very different market, and it'll take a lot of work. But that's one of the reasons I was happy to come here and meet the Korean groups of all these developers and media.
Thank you.